I am Abigail, 32 years old, and born into a family where money was never discussed but always displayed. Growing up, I learned quickly that in my parents' eyes, I would never measure up to my perfect sister Madison. When my beloved grandparents unexpectedly passed away last year, I discovered they had left me a substantial inheritance. What I never anticipated was how far my parents would go to redirect that money to their favorite daughter. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, stay with me. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up in our sprawling colonial home in Connecticut, I always felt like an afterthought. Our family had what people call old money, inherited through generations and carefully managed by my father Richard and mother Eleanor. From my earliest memories, the pattern was clear. Madison, my younger sister by 4 years, was the golden child. When I brought home straight, as in middle school, my report card would receive a cursory glance and a distracted "good job, Abby." But when Madison brought home even a single A among her BS, my parents threw a celebration dinner. "Madison has been working so hard," my mother would announce to everyone within earshot. "She deserves special recognition." I would sit quietly at these dinners, pushing food around my plate, wondering what made my achievements so much less worthy of celebration. My grandparents, Martha and Harold, lived just a 30-minute drive away in their historic Victorian home that had been in the family for generations. From the time I was 7, I noticed how differently they treated me compared to my parents. When I visited them, usually every other weekend, Grandma Martha would look me in the eyes when I spoke. She would ask follow-up questions about my interests. Grandpa Harold would ruffle my hair and call me the smart one. During one particular Thanksgiving when I was 11, I overheard a tense conversation between my grandparents and parents. "Richard, you missed Abigail's science fair yesterday," Grandma Martha said, her voice uncharacteristically stern. "She won first place. We were there, but she kept looking at the door hoping you would arrive." "Mother, we had Madison's dance recital," my father replied dismissively. "You know how important her dancing is to her future. Abigail understands." "Does she?" Grandpa Harold interjected. The girl looked heartbroken. My mother sighed audibly. "Martha, Harold, please don't start this again. We love both our girls equally. They just have different needs." Even at that young age, I knew that wasn't true. Madison needed constant attention and praise. I apparently needed to accept being invisible. As we moved into our teenage years, the disparity grew more pronounced. Madison developed a knack for manipulating situations to maintain her position as the favorite. If I mentioned my interest in attending a prestigious college, Madison would suddenly express the same interest, prompting my parents to hire specialized tutors for her. When I won a regional essay contest in 10th grade, Madison developed a mysterious illness the day of the award ceremony. My parents naturally stayed home with her, missing my moment of recognition. "Your sister is simply more sensitive than you," my mother explained when I expressed my disappointment. "You're stronger, Abigail. You can handle these things on your own." Being labeled strong became a curse. It meant I deserved less support, less attention, less love. By the time I reached college age, I had internalized the need to seek validation. Though my true passion was literature, I pursued finance because my father occasionally mentioned admiration for women who understood business. I graduated summa cum laude from Dartmouth, hoping finally to earn the approval I desperately craved. At my graduation, my parents attended but left early because Madison, who was taking a gap year after barely graduating high school, had called complaining of loneliness. Throughout these years, my grandparents remained my emotional anchors. When my parents couldn't attend my high school graduation because Madison had a minor car accident, a fender bender that somehow required both parents' attention for days, Grandma Martha and Grandpa Harold not only attended, but threw me a small celebration at their home afterward. "You are extraordinary, Abigail," Grandpa Harold told me that day. "Never forget that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it." Those words became a mantra during particularly difficult family gatherings, like the Christmas when my parents gave Madison a new car while I received a department store gift card. Or the time my mother forgot to mention my promotion at her ladies' luncheon but spent 20 minutes detailing Madison's new job as a receptionist at a local salon. Despite the constant disappointments, some childish part of me held on to the hope that one day my parents would see me. Really see me. That somehow I would finally do something worthy enough to earn the love they so freely gave my sister. This hope, however misguided, kept me attending family functions, kept me sending birthday cards, kept me calling every Sunday night. It kept me tethered to a family where I was always reaching for acceptance that remained perpetually out of grasp. As the years progressed, my grandparents' Victorian home became my sanctuary. Every other weekend, I would make the drive from my apartment in Boston to their house in Connecticut, feeling the weight of inadequacy lift as I turned onto their maple-lined driveway. Unlike the cold perfection of my parents' home, their house was warm, slightly cluttered with meaningful mementos, and always smelled of cinnamon and old books. "There she is, our brilliant girl," Grandpa Harold would announce as I walked through the door, regardless of whatever achievements or failures had marked my week. His consistent pride in me existed independently of any specific accomplishment. During my second year at Dartmouth, when I called my parents to ask for help with tuition after losing a scholarship due to budget cuts, my mother had sighed heavily. "Abigail, we've already committed to covering Madison's entire education at Westfield State. You know she needs the support more than you do. Can't you just take out additional loans? You're studying finance, after all. You'll be able to pay them back eventually." I didn't tell them that I had lost my scholarship because I had spent so many hours helping Madison with her college applications instead of focusing on maintaining my perfect GPA. Helping my sister had seemed like a way to finally earn my parents' approval. Instead, it had cost me financially. 2 days after that disappointing call, Grandpa Harold phoned me. "Abigail, I'd like to discuss an investment opportunity with you," he said, his voice casual but determined. "Your grandmother and I would like to invest in your education. We believe the returns will be substantial." When I protested, Grandma Martha got on the line. "Darling, this isn't charity. This is belief in your future. Sometimes family means recognizing potential and nurturing it. Let us do this." They paid not only for the remainder of my undergraduate education, but also for my MBA. During those years, my financial education extended far beyond the classroom. On those weekend visits, Grandpa Harold would invite me into his study, a wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the comfortable leather smell of old money. The family fortune wasn't always managed wisely. He confided in me one rainy Saturday afternoon when I was 24. "Your great-grandfather nearly lost everything in 29. It was your great-grandmother Sophia who secretly began investing in stable commodities. Women weren't supposed to understand finance back then, but she saved this family." He pulled out ledgers, stock certificates, and family financial histories, teaching me not just about wealth management, but about our family's relationship with money. These lessons continued for years, and I gradually realized he was preparing me for something, though I wasn't sure what. Meanwhile, Grandma Martha focused on a different kind of education. She shared family stories, values, and traditions. On Sunday mornings, we would sit in her garden room, drinking Earl Grey tea from delicate cups that had belonged to my great-great-grandmother. "Family is more than blood or inheritance," she would say, her eyes kind but somehow evaluating. "It's about character, about doing right by each other even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult." During one such conversation when I was 27, she broached a subject we usually avoided. "Your parents love you, Abigail," she said carefully. "They just don't understand you. Some people can only see reflections of themselves. Madison mirrors your mother's insecurities and your father's need for admiration. You've always been more like Harold and me, independent and perhaps a bit too self-sufficient for your own good." "They've always favored her," I said softly, the admission painful even after all these years. Grandma Martha didn't deny it. "Yes, and that's their failure, not yours. Harold and I have noticed. We've tried to speak with them about it over the years, but some patterns become too comfortable to break. There was something in her tone that day, a hint of resolve that made me wonder what conversations had happened behind closed doors. With my grandparents' guidance and support, I built a successful career as an investment analyst. By 30, I was making partner at a boutique firm in Boston, specializing in sustainable investing. When I called my parents to share the news, my father seemed distracted. "That's nice, Abby. Listen, Madison is thinking about opening her own salon. Would you mind giving her some business advice? You know numbers aren't her strong suit." It was always like this. My accomplishments were stepping stones to help Madison. Yet with my grandparents, I found validation and genuine support. The last time I saw my grandparents together was at their 60th anniversary celebration, just 3 months before the accident. It was an intimate gathering at their home, notably without my parents and Madison, who had a prior commitment at Madison's salon. After dinner, Grandpa Harold pulled me aside. At 84, he moved more slowly than before, but his mind remained razor-sharp. "Abigail, your grandmother and I have been discussing the future," he said, his voice lower than usual. "We're not getting any younger, and there are matters we need to ensure are properly arranged." "Grandpa, I don't want to talk about this," I protested, the thought of losing them too painful to contemplate. "I know, my dear, but wisdom means confronting difficult truths. We've made certain decisions that may surprise some people, but they shouldn't surprise you." He squeezed my hand. "Just know that everything we've done has been with careful consideration and love." Grandma Martha joined us, linking her arm with mine. "We're proud of the woman you've become, Abigail. Whatever happens in the future, never doubt that." Their words felt oddly like a goodbye, though I dismissed the feeling at the time. I didn't realize then that they were preparing me for what was to come, laying the groundwork for the battle that would soon engulf our family. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was preparing for a client meeting when my phone lit up with my mother's number, unusual enough to make me pause. Her voice was controlled but strained. "Abigail, there's been an accident. Your grandparents were driving back from their lake house. The road was wet from rain." Her voice trailed off. "Mom." My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Are they okay?" The silence stretched for several seconds before she continued. "No, Abigail. They're gone. Both of them." The next few days passed in a blur of arrangements and grief. I took immediate leave from work and drove to Connecticut, my vision occasionally blurring with tears as memories of weekend visits flooded back. The thought of never again seeing Grandpa Harold's welcoming smile or feeling Grandma Martha's gentle hands on my shoulders left a physical ache in my chest. When I arrived at my parents' house, Madison was already there, her eyes red and puffy. For a brief moment, our shared loss transcended the complex dynamics between us, and we embraced in genuine shared grief. That moment of connection was short-lived. "I can't believe they're gone," Madison sobbed dramatically in the living room, surrounded by neighbors bringing condolence casseroles. "They were like second parents to me." I bit my tongue, knowing that Madison had visited our grandparents perhaps twice a year at most, usually when she needed money or was between relationships and seeking attention. My weekly visits and genuine connection with them went unmentioned. The funeral was elegant and somber, befitting two people who had lived with such dignity. I was asked to deliver one of the eulogies, a responsibility that both honored and terrified me. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, I spoke from my heart about two people who had shaped my life in profound ways. Martha and Harold Blake didn't just teach me about our family history, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They taught me about integrity, about quiet strength, and about loving without conditions. They saw people for who they truly were and valued authentic connection above all else. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my mother shift uncomfortably in the front pew. Beside her, my father stared stonily ahead, his expression unreadable. 3 days after the funeral, Benjamin Thornton, my grandparents' attorney of 30 years, requested the family's presence at his office for the reading of the will. The atmosphere in his wood-paneled office was tense as my parents, Madison, and I took seats around a polished conference table. Benjamin, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, began with formal condolences before opening a leather portfolio. Before I begin the specific distributions, I should note that Martha and Harold Blake's estate is substantial, valued at approximately $28 million, including properties, investments, and personal assets. My mother gasped audibly. Even I was surprised by the figure, though Grandpa Harold had given me hints about their financial position over the years. Benjamin continued, to their granddaughter, Madison Blake, they leave their lake house property in New Hampshire, valued at approximately $1.2 million, along with a cash gift of $500,000. Madison smiled through her tears, glancing triumphantly at me. I remained expressionless, waiting. To their son, Richard Blake, and daughter-in-law, Eleanor Blake, they leave their collection of art and antiques, valued at approximately $2 million, as well as a cash gift of $1 million. My father nodded, his expression calculating. My mother reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. Benjamin cleared his throat before continuing, and to their granddaughter, Abigail Blake, they leave the primary residence in Connecticut, valued at $4 million, their investment portfolio valued at approximately $15 million, their remaining cash assets of approximately $4.3 million, and all remaining personal effects not specifically designated elsewhere. The silence in the room was absolute for 3 full seconds before my mother's voice cut through it like glass. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. Benjamin looked at her calmly. There is no mistake, Mrs. Blake. The will is quite clear and was updated just 6 months ago with Martha and Harold of sound mind and body, witnessed appropriately. But that's not fair. Madison burst out, her previous satisfaction evaporating. Why would they leave Abigail almost everything? I was their granddaughter too. I sat in stunned silence, processing the implications. While I had known my grandparents valued our relationship, I never expected this level of disparity in their final wishes. The inheritance was life-changing, but I already recognized it would come with a terrible cost to family relationships. This is outrageous. My father finally spoke, his voice cold. My parents would never have intentionally created such an imbalance. Abigail must have influenced them somehow. I felt as though I'd been slapped. Excuse me? I managed to say. Benjamin interrupted before the situation could escalate further. Mr. Blake, Mrs. Blake, I should inform you that Martha and Harold anticipated this reaction. They left a letter explaining their decisions, which I have been instructed to read only if their distributions were questioned. Read it, my mother demanded. Benjamin opened a sealed envelope and began reading in a measured tone. To our beloved family, if this letter is being read, it means our decisions have been questioned. We want to be clear that we have made these choices with full awareness and careful consideration over many years. Our distributions reflect not only our relationships with each family member, but also our assessment of needs, previous gifts given during our lifetime, and our confidence in each recipient's ability to responsibly manage their inheritance. We love you all, but we have chosen to allocate our estate in the manner we believe best serves everyone's long-term interests and honors the values we hold dear. We ask that you respect our wishes and maintain family harmony. With eternal love, Martha and Harold Blake. My mother's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Madison was openly crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. My father stood abruptly. This isn't over, he stated flatly. We'll be contesting this will. As we left the attorney's office, the divide in our family had never felt wider or more unbridgeable. What should have been a time of shared mourning had become the opening salvo in what would become an ugly battle over money, fairness, and family loyalty. I drove back to Boston that evening with my grandparents' words echoing in my mind, wondering if they had truly anticipated the storm their decisions would unleash. The campaign began subtly. 3 days after the reading of the will, my mother called, her voice honeyed in a way that immediately put me on alert. Abigail, darling, I hope you're doing well with everything that's happened, she began. Your father and I have been thinking about what Grandma and Grandpa would really want for our family. I remained silent, waiting for the real purpose of her call. You know, Madison has been struggling financially with her salon startup. And that inheritance, well, it's really quite excessive for one person, don't you think? Surely you plan to share some of it with your sister? That would be the right thing to do. The implication was clear. If I didn't voluntarily redistribute my inheritance, I was selfish and morally deficient. Mom, I'm still processing Grandma and Grandpa's death, I replied carefully. I haven't made any decisions about the inheritance yet. Her tone chilled immediately. I see. Well, I hope you'll consider what's fair for the entire family, not just yourself. The calls increased in frequency, alternating between my mother's emotional manipulation and my father's more direct approach. Abigail, this situation is creating unnecessary tension in the family, he stated during one particularly strained conversation. Madison is your sister. Blood should mean something to you. When phone calls proved ineffective, they escalated to an ambush dinner. I arrived at their house one Sunday evening to find not only my parents and Madison, but also my father's brother Uncle Thomas, his wife Aunt Patricia, and their daughter, my cousin Brittany. The atmosphere was tense as we took our seats around the formal dining table. We thought it would be good to have a family discussion, my mother announced after a painfully silent appetizer course. What followed was a coordinated attack. Uncle Thomas spoke about family loyalty. Aunt Patricia tearfully described how hurt Madison was. Madison herself alternated between sullen silence and tearful accusations about how I had always been the favorite of our grandparents. Only my father's sister, Aunt Grace, who arrived late and hadn't been briefed on the intervention plan, seemed uncomfortable with the proceedings. I don't understand why we're discussing Martha and Harold's private decisions as if they're up for family vote, she said, frowning at my father. They were of sound mind and had every right to distribute their estate as they saw fit. Grace, you don't understand the situation, my mother replied dismissively. Abigail clearly influenced them inappropriately. By visiting them regularly and showing genuine interest in their lives? Aunt Grace raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound inappropriate to me. I shot her a grateful look as the dinner disintegrated into tense arguing. Driving home that night, I felt more isolated than ever, but also more resolved to honor my grandparents' wishes. The next phase of manipulation came in the form of threats. A week after the disastrous dinner, my father called. Abigail, our attorney has advised us that we have grounds to contest the will based on undue influence, he stated without preamble. Before we proceed with legal action, I wanted to give you one more opportunity to come to a reasonable arrangement with your sister. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, my stomach nodding. Transfer half of the financial assets to Madison, and we'll drop the matter. When I didn't immediately agree, the threats escalated. The family lawyer, Jeffrey Simmons, sent a formal letter outlining their intent to contest the will, citing my suspicious level of involvement with my grandparents in their final years. Meanwhile, Madison had begun her own campaign, contacting mutual friends and extended family to share her version of events. According to her narrative, I had manipulated our elderly grandparents, isolating them from the family and poisoning them against her. These rumors reached me through my cousin Stephanie, who called to warn me. I don't believe any of it, Stephanie assured me. But Madison is telling everyone who'll listen that you practically held Grandma and Grandpa hostage during their last years. That's absurd, I replied, the hurt cutting deep. She barely visited them. She was too busy with her own life to make time for them. Stephanie hesitated before continuing. There's more, Abby. Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Richard have been saying things too. Did you know they tried to get Grandma and Grandpa to change their will last year? Apparently, there was a huge argument about it. This was news to me. What? When did this happen? Around Christmas. Grandpa Harold refused to discuss it with them after that. Mom overheard them arguing about it at the New Year's party. The pieces were starting to fall into place. My grandparents' slightly strained relationship with my parents over the past year. Their cryptic comments about difficult decisions. The way Grandpa Harold had seemed especially determined to ensure I understood the family finances. The ultimate betrayal came in the form of court documents. My parents formally filed a lawsuit contesting the will, claiming I had exerted undue influence over my grandparents, that they had lacked capacity to make sound decisions, and most painfully, that I had emotionally manipulated them by fabricating stories about family mistreatment. Seeing these accusations in black and white legal language felt like a physical blow. The family that should have been united in grief was now irreparably divided by greed and resentment. Madison refused to speak to me except through lawyers. My parents treated me as if I were a criminal who had stolen from the family rather than their daughter who was simply honoring her grandparents' wishes. The night after being served with the lawsuit, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by photo albums of happier times. There was Grandpa Harold teaching me to fish when I was 8, Grandma Martha and me baking cookies in her kitchen. Family Christmases when the tensions weren't quite so visible. I traced their smiling faces with my finger, tears blurring my vision. "I miss you both so much," I whispered to their photographs. "I wish you were here to help me through this." In that moment of despair, my phone rang. It was Benjamin Thornton, my grandparents' attorney. "Abigail, I've just been made aware of the lawsuit," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I think it's time we discuss some additional information your grandparents left in my keeping." Information they hoped would never be necessary to reveal, but which they prepared, just in case. His words ignited a small flame of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me since the reading of the will. Perhaps my grandparents, wise and forward-thinking as always, had anticipated this battle and prepared accordingly. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade imposing and cold. Despite the warm June day, I felt chilled to the bone as I climbed the steps, Benjamin Thornton at my side. We had spent weeks preparing for this hearing, the first major confrontation in what promised to be a protracted legal battle. "Remember what we discussed," Benjamin said quietly as we approached the courtroom doors. "Let the evidence speak for itself. Try not to take their accusations personally, though I know that's asking a lot." Inside, my parents and Madison were already seated at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, Lawrence Peterson, a sharp-featured man known for aggressive tactics in inheritance disputes. Madison avoided my gaze, studying her manicured nails with intense focus. My mother stared straight ahead, her posture rigid. Only my father glanced my way, his expression a mixture of determination and something that might have been regret. As Judge Andrea Coleman entered and the proceedings began, I tried to steady my breathing. Peterson opened with a scathing characterization of me as a manipulative granddaughter who had systematically isolated elderly, vulnerable grandparents from their loving family. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Abigail Blake took advantage of Martha and Harold Blake's advanced age and declining health to secure an outrageously disproportionate inheritance for herself," Peterson argued. "She visited them excessively, inserted herself into their financial affairs, and created friction between them and the rest of their loving family." The term "loving family" made me clench my jaw so hard it ached. When it was Benjamin's turn to speak, his approach was markedly different, calm and measured. "Your Honor, before we proceed further, I have documentation that Martha and Harold Blake anticipated this very situation and left specific instructions and evidence with me as their longtime attorney. With the court's permission, I would like to submit this evidence now, as it directly addresses the claims being made." Judge Coleman nodded her approval, and Benjamin presented a sealed envelope to the court clerk. "The first item is a detailed financial history of gifts and support provided by Martha and Harold Blake to all family members over the past 15 years, Benjamin explained. This document was meticulously maintained by Harold Blake, a former financial analyst, and updated quarterly. As the judge reviewed the document, her eyebrows raised slightly. She looked over her reading glasses at my parents. "Mr. Peterson, were your clients aware that according to these records, Madison Blake has already received gifts totaling over $2 million from her grandparents during their lifetime? Or that they paid for her entire education, her first salon business which subsequently failed, and covered significant personal debts on 7 separate occasions?" Peterson looked startled, turning to confer hurriedly with my parents. My mother's face had paled considerably. Furthermore, Benjamin continued, the second document is a series of letters between Martha Blake and several family counselors over the past decade, in which she expresses concern about the family dynamics, particularly the treatment of Abigail compared to Madison. Judge Coleman spent several minutes reading through these letters, her expression growing increasingly troubled. The third item, Benjamin said, is perhaps most relevant to the claims of undue influence. It is a video recording made by Martha and Harold Blake just 3 months before their passing, specifically addressing their estate decisions. The courtroom fell silent as a screen was set up. My heart raced as my grandparents' faces appeared, looking serious but resolute. Grandpa Harold spoke first, his voice strong despite his age. We are recording this statement on April 15, 2024, of our own free will and with full mental capacity. We wish to address our decision regarding the distribution of our estate. Grandma Martha continued, we have made a deliberate choice to leave the majority of our estate to our granddaughter Abigail. This decision was not made lightly or without consideration for all members of our family. They proceeded to explain, in clear and sometimes painful detail, their reasoning. They discussed Madison's previous financial gifts and her pattern of irresponsibility with money. They mentioned my parents' comfortable financial position and their consistent favoritism toward Madison throughout our childhoods. Most surprisingly, they revealed that my parents had approached them multiple times in recent years asking for early inheritances or loans that were never repaid. We love all our family, Grandpa Harold stated firmly. But love doesn't mean ignoring reality or enabling harmful patterns. Abigail has shown responsibility, care, and genuine affection without financial motivation. Our decision reflects our values and our hope for the legacy we leave behind. As the video ended, I wiped away tears. Even from beyond the grave, they were protecting me, validating what I had always felt but never fully expressed about our family dynamics. The courtroom remained silent for several long moments. Madison was openly crying now, but her tears seemed different, less performative. My father stared at the blank screen, his expression unreadable. My mother looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Peterson conferred with my parents before addressing the court. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, we request a brief recess to consult with our clients. Judge Coleman agreed, and as we filed out of the courtroom, Benjamin squeezed my shoulder supportively. There's more, he whispered, if needed. During the recess, I stood alone in a quiet corridor, processing the morning's revelations. To my surprise, Madison approached, her makeup smeared from crying. Did you know? She asked, her voice small. About the video, about all of it? I shook my head.
No.
I knew Grandma and Grandpa had concerns, but not the extent of it. Madison nodded slowly. Mom and Dad told me you were manipulating them, that you were lying about me to them. She looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. I believed them because it was easier than admitting they pushed me to demand more than I deserved. Before I could respond, Peterson approached with my parents, indicating the recess was ending. As we entered the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Peterson addressed the judge immediately. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, my clients would like to withdraw their petition contesting the will. Judge Coleman looked at my parents directly. Mr. and Mrs. Blake, is this your wish? My father nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. Very well, Judge Coleman replied, but her tone suggested the matter wasn't entirely settled. Before I dismiss this case, I feel compelled to note that the evidence presented today suggests a troubling pattern of family dynamics. The court strongly recommends family counseling. As we left the courtroom, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and profound sadness. I had won, but at what cost? The family I had always hoped would someday truly accept me now stood further away than ever. Yet for the first time, the truth about our relationships had been spoken aloud, impossible to ignore or minimize any longer. Benjamin walked me to my car. Your grandparents were remarkable people, Abigail. They saw this coming years ago and prepared accordingly. But they always hoped it wouldn't be necessary to reveal everything publicly. "Thank you for everything," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "There's one more thing," he added, handing me a small, sealed envelope. "Martha asked me to give you this privately after everything was settled. For your eyes only." I sat in my car long after Benjamin had gone, holding the unopened envelope from Grandma Martha, feeling as though I stood at a crossroads between the painful past and an uncertain future. The envelope remained unopened on my coffee table for 3 days. Each time I reached for it, something held me back, a mix of anticipation and dread about its contents. Finally, on a quiet Sunday morning that reminded me of countless breakfasts with Grandma Martha, I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter in my grandmother's elegant script, dated just 1 month before the accident. "My dearest Abigail, if you're reading this, then our suspicions were unfortunately correct, and your inheritance has caused the family conflict we feared but prepared for. First, please know that your grandfather and I made our decisions with complete clarity and conviction. We were not manipulated or confused. We simply saw the truth of our family and acted accordingly. What you don't know, what we kept even from Benjamin until recently, is that we created a secondary trust with specific conditions. This trust contains an additional $5 million, currently held separately from your primary inheritance. This money is designated for family healing, with 3 specific provisions. First, if your parents and Madison contested the will and then withdrew their contest, as we anticipated they might once our video was shown, this money is to be offered to them under specific conditions. They must agree to family counseling for a minimum of 1 year. They must acknowledge, in writing, the patterns of favoritism and unfair treatment that have characterized your relationship since childhood. And they must commit to making genuine amends. Second, if they refuse these conditions, the money will instead fund a foundation in our name dedicated to supporting neglected or overlooked children, with you as the sole director. Third, regardless of their choice, $1 million from this trust is designated exclusively for you, to use as you see fit, with no conditions attached. This is our gift to you for the years of quiet pain you endured while maintaining your dignity and compassion. The choice of whether to reveal this additional trust to your parents and Madison is entirely yours. You may decide that clean boundaries are healthier than attempted reconciliation. We would understand completely if that is your choice. Whatever you decide, we trust your judgment implicitly. Remember what I told you in the garden that spring afternoon. Family is about character, about doing right by each other even when it's difficult. You have always exemplified the best character in our family, Abigail. We couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become. With all my love, Grandma Martha. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Even now, they were teaching me, guiding me, offering wisdom about family healing while respecting my autonomy to choose my path forward. The surprise trust was ingenious, creating both consequences for my parents' behavior and potential incentive for genuine change. 2 days later, I met with Benjamin to discuss the secondary trust. They were remarkable strategists, he acknowledged with a sad smile. They hoped the video alone would be enough, but they prepared this backup plan just in case. The question now is whether you want to reveal its existence to your parents and Madison. I considered carefully before answering. Yes. Not because I believe they deserve more money, but because I think Grandma Martha was right about the potential for healing, however slim. The conditions are fair, and the choice will be theirs. Benjamin nodded approvingly. I'll arrange a meeting. The meeting took place in Benjamin's office the following week. My parents arrived looking subdued, the courtroom revelations having evidently impacted their usual confidence. Madison entered separately, giving me a hesitant nod of acknowledgement. Benjamin explained the secondary trust and its conditions methodically. As he spoke, I watched the expressions shift on my family members' faces, from surprise to calculation to uncertain hope. So, to be clear, my father said when Benjamin finished, if we agree to counseling and acknowledge the family dynamics Abigail has felt, there would be additional inheritance for Madison and us? That is correct, Benjamin confirmed. Though I should emphasize that the acknowledgement must be genuine and the counseling commitment fulfilled before any funds are distributed. Martha and Harold were very specific about this. My mother looked at me directly, for perhaps the first time since the will reading. "And this was your grandparents' decision? Not yours." "Yes," I replied simply. "Though whether to tell you about it was my choice." Madison spoke up, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Why would you choose to tell us? After everything we said about you, the lawsuit, the rumors, why offer us anything?" I considered my answer carefully. Because Grandma Martha believed in the possibility of healing, even in the most broken relationships. And because despite everything, you're still my family. The room fell silent as the implications of my words sank in. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, accountability, and the possibility of a new kind of relationship built on honesty rather than pretense. "We'll need time to discuss this," my father finally said. "Of course," Benjamin replied. "The offer remains open for 30 days. As we prepared to leave, Benjamin handed me another envelope. "One final item your grandmother left for you. She asked that I give you this only after the secondary trust was revealed." Alone in my apartment that evening, I opened this last message from my grandmother. Inside was a single photograph I'd never seen before, showing Grandma Martha as a young woman standing beside her own grandmother. On the back was written, "Family patterns can be broken. My grandmother showed me the way when my own parents couldn't. Now I pass that wisdom to you. Some inheritances are worth more than money." I traced their faces with my finger, understanding now that the true inheritance my grandparents had left wasn't the millions in my bank account, but the wisdom, love, and extraordinary foresight they had demonstrated throughout their lives and beyond. They had created a path for possible reconciliation while ensuring I would be protected regardless of the outcome. 3 days later, Madison called me, asking to meet for coffee alone. It was the first step on what would prove to be a long, complicated journey toward a new kind of family relationship, one built on truth rather than comfortable illusions. 23 days after learning about the secondary trust, my parents formally accepted its conditions. The letter acknowledging their favoritism must have been excruciating for them to write, particularly for my mother, whose handwriting grew increasingly unsteady toward the end of the 3-page document. We recognized that we consistently prioritized Madison's needs and desires above Abigail's. One particularly difficult paragraph read, "We celebrated Madison's achievements while taking Abigail's for granted." We justified this disparity by telling ourselves that Abigail was stronger and needed less support, when in reality, every child deserves equal love and recognition. We failed as parents to provide this basic fairness. Our first family counseling session was scheduled for the following week with Dr. Teresa Reynolds, a specialist in family estrangement and reconciliation. Walking into her warm, simply furnished office felt like crossing a threshold into unknown territory. My father sat stiffly on one end of the couch, my mother perched nervously beside him. Madison chose an armchair rather than sitting next to me on the love seat, a small but noticeable statement about where we stood. "Before we begin," Dr. Reynolds said after introductions, "I want to acknowledge the unusual circumstances that brought you here. Financial incentives for therapy aren't ideal motivators, but they don't invalidate the work we might accomplish together. The question is whether, beyond the conditions of the trust, there's genuine desire for healing in this room." The silence that followed was telling. Eventually, to my surprise, it was Madison who spoke first. "I want to try," she said quietly, "even if we weren't getting anything from it." Over the following months, our weekly sessions became a space for painful truths and gradual understanding. Progress wasn't linear. Some sessions ended with tears and slammed doors. Others brought small breakthroughs, moments of genuine connection that had eluded us for decades. During our 3rd month of counseling, my mother broke down completely while discussing a childhood memory I had shared, a piano recital where she had left early to attend Madison's dance class. "I don't even remember doing that," she sobbed, genuinely distressed. "There are so many moments you've mentioned that I just don't remember, but I can see how much they hurt you." "That's part of the problem," I replied gently. These weren't memorable moments for you, but they were formative for me. Outside of therapy, I focused on building my new life. The Victorian house I had inherited became my home after some renovations to make it my own while preserving my grandparents' essence. Working with Benjamin, I established the Martha and Harold Blake Foundation, dedicating a portion of my inheritance to supporting overlooked students with academic potential but insufficient family support. The foundation became my passion, a way to honor my grandparents while transforming my painful experiences into something constructive. Each scholarship recipient reminded me of myself at that age, hungry for validation and opportunity. Being able to provide both, along with mentorship, healed parts of me I hadn't realized were still wounded. Madison and I began meeting for coffee every other week, separate from our family therapy sessions. These conversations, awkward at first, gradually evolved into something resembling genuine sisterhood. I always envied you, she confessed during one such meeting 6 months into our new relationship. You were so smart, so capable. Mom and Dad made everything so easy for me that I never developed confidence in my own abilities. And I envied you, I admitted. You had their love and attention without having to earn it. This new honesty between us, painful as it sometimes was, created space for authentic connection that had never existed before. My relationship with my parents progressed more slowly. Years of entrenched patterns couldn't be undone in months, and there were setbacks. My father, in particular, struggled with the loss of authority and the acknowledgement of his failures. But there were also moments of genuine effort, like when he asked about the foundation's work or remembered details about my current projects without prompting. After the required year of counseling was complete and the secondary trust funds were distributed as promised, I wondered whether our family's progress would continue or revert. To my relief and surprise, my parents requested to continue the therapy sessions, now paying for them personally. We've only just begun to understand, my mother explained when I expressed surprise. I don't want to lose the progress we've made. 2 years after my grandparents' passing, I stood in the garden of what was now my home, hosting the annual gathering for the foundation's scholarship recipients and their mentors. Madison was helping serve refreshments, her natural social skills making the teenagers feel welcomed and valued. My parents had attended briefly, still uncomfortable in this setting, but making an effort that would have been unimaginable before. As twilight fell and the party wound down, I found myself alone in Grandma Martha's rose garden, the scent of late summer blooms filling the air. I could almost feel her presence beside me, could almost hear Grandpa Harold's chuckle from the study window. You were right, I whispered to their memory. Family is about character and doing right by each other, especially when it's difficult. The journey of healing hadn't been easy. There had been days when grief overwhelmed me, when anger at decades of dismissal threatened to consume me, when forgiveness seemed impossible. Therapy had helped me process these complex emotions, to forgive without forgetting, to establish healthy boundaries while remaining open to genuine change. The most valuable inheritance my grandparents left wasn't the money or property, substantial as they were. It was the model of integrity they provided, the wisdom they shared, and their unwavering belief in my worth when I struggled to see it myself. They showed me that true family isn't always defined by blood, but by those who see you clearly and love you completely. My story isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. My parents still sometimes slip into old patterns. Madison and I still navigate occasional jealousies and misunderstandings. The difference now is that we face these challenges honestly, without the pretense that everything is perfect when it isn't. I've learned that healing doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending the pain never existed. It means acknowledging the wounds, understanding their origins, and choosing a different path forward. It means accepting that some relationships will never be what we wished for in childhood, while remaining open to what they might become with work and honesty. Most importantly, I've learned that my value was never dependent on my parents' ability to see it. Just as Grandpa Harold told me at my high school graduation all those years ago, my worth exists independently of others' recognition of it. That knowledge, more than any financial inheritance, is the true gift my grandparents left me. Have you ever had to deal with family favoritism or unfair treatment? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by family recognition. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what's in the will, but the wisdom we gain through life's challenges.